May call your next witness.
State calls Rosemary Jassoy.
You swear or affirm the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God.
See, please, right here. Okay.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you state your full name for the record and spell your last name for the court reporter, please?
Yes, my name is Rosemary Jean Jassoy. Last name is spelled Jassoy.
And what do you do for a living?
I am a senior crime laboratory analyst for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the Tampa Bay Regional Operations Center in the firearms section.
And how long have you worked as a senior crime laboratory analyst?
I've been a senior crime laboratory analyst for about 12 years.
And how long have you been with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Since 1996.
Okay. And you indicated you're in the firearms section?
I am.
And what is your education and training to work as a crime laboratory analyst in the firearms section?
In 1986, I joined the Center of Forensic Sciences in Toronto, Ontario as a firearms examiner, and there I underwent 2 years of a structured training course that included standard laboratory techniques, microscopy, photomicroscopy, firearm and tool mark identification. As part of my training and in the conduct of research, I've also visited numerous firearms and ammunition factories, both in Canada and the States.
Okay. In order to continue to work in the area, well, do you work in the area of firearms identification?
Yes, I do.
In order to continue to work in that field, do you have to maintain and show proficiency in that field?
That's correct.
Okay. How often do you have to do that?
We have to successfully complete a proficiency test on a yearly basis.
Okay. And what are your duties as a crime laboratory analyst?
My duties include the examination of fired components, such as bullets and cartridge cases, to determine whether or not they have been fired in the same firearm or in a specific firearm. I also check firearms for functionality. I do distance determination, serial number restoration, and if applicable, I will enter cartridge cases into a NIBIN database. And the NIBIN database is, the acronym stands for National Integrated Ballistics Information Network.
Okay. And have you ever testified as an expert in the area of firearms identification?
I have.
How many times?
In Ontario, at all levels of court, in excess of 80 times, and in Florida, in both federal and circuit court level, in excess of 100 times.
Okay. Can you say how many times you've testified as an expert here in Hillsborough County?
Numerous. I can't tell you the exact number.
Okay. And what is firearms identification?
Firearms identification is a discipline of forensic science whose main purpose is to determine whether or not bullets or cartridge cases have been fired in the same firearm or a specific firearm.
Okay. And since we're talking about firearms, what is a basic definition of a firearm?
A firearm is an assembly of an action and a barrel whose main purpose is to propel a projectile via use of combustion.
Okay. And are there different types of firearms?
Yes.
What is a revolver?
A revolver is a hand-held firearm that has a chamber that holds, a cylinder that holds several chambers where the cartridges are inserted. And that cylinder rotates on a central axis, and the same firing mechanism is used to fire all of those chambers.
Okay. And is there another type of handgun called a semi-automatic?
Yes.
And how does that firearm work?
A semi-automatic is, again, another handgun, and it works by chambering, extracting, or firing, extracting, and ejecting cartridge cases by a single pull of the trigger every time you want to fire that firearm. And you can do that as many times as you have cartridges in the magazine.
Okay. And what is a bullet?
A bullet is a spherical projectile, if you will, and its purpose is to be fired out of the cartridge case and down the barrel of a firearm.
Okay, and what is a cartridge case?
A cartridge case is a container, if you will, for all of the components of a cartridge. And that includes the primer, which is the spark or the ignition source for the gunpowder that's within the cartridge case. And at the end of the cartridge case is a bullet.
Okay. And when we're talking about firearms and ammunition for firearms, is there a term called caliber?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Caliber generally refers to the nominal diameter of a bullet.
Okay. And is caliber used as a means to classify different types of firearms and ammunition?
Yes. Caliber is also a specific designation for which a specific firearm, which is chambered in a specific firearm. Or if a bullet hits an object, it could stop it, or it may deflect off of that object.
Okay. And when we're talking about firearms identification, what makes it possible to identify cartridge cases and projectiles to each other and to a firearm?
When a firearm is manufactured, the surface areas of the tools that are doing the manufacture are constantly changing. And those changes are imparted onto the different firearm parts. Because the firearm is now softer than the tools that are making those different parts. After the firearm is assembled, through use, damage, abuse, corrosion of the firearm, those individual characteristics continue to change. And because the components of a cartridge are softer than the firearm, the cartridge case and the bullet, then those individual imperfections of the firearm could be imparted onto those parts when the cartridge is fired.
Okay. And how do you go about identifying these projectiles or cartridge cases to a specific gun?
If I have a specific firearm, I need to test fire the firearm. That gives me known samples for my comparison. If the exhibits that I have are of a similar class characteristic that could have been fired from that firearm, I then will compare them using a comparison microscope. And a comparison microscope is simply two microscopes joined together by an optical bridge that allows me to look at two objects side by side under the same magnification. I mentioned class characteristics, so those are manufacturer's blueprints, if you will, and those are predetermined prior to manufacture. Things like the caliber, things like rifling. And rifling is simply a spiral cutout of the inside of the bore that gives the bullet spin so that it has gyroscopic stability when it exits the barrel. Some manufacturers think their bullet will operate, or their cartridge will operate better with 5 lands and grooves, 5 cutouts, lands and grooves with a left twist, some 6 with a right twist. So if those class characteristics are similar, then I will compare those individual characteristics that I spoke about that are the signature, if you will, of the firearm to my fired components using the comparison microscope.
Okay. And along with class characteristics, is there a term called repeatable individual characteristics?
Yes.
Can you explain that to the jury?
Repeatable individual characteristics are simply random imperfection, accidental characteristics that are imparted onto the firearm parts, incidental to manufacture, as I said, and or use, abuse, damage, and corrosion of the firearm itself.
Okay. And when a firearm is actually fired, shoots the projectile and hits the cartridge case, does that leave individual characteristics or repeatable individual characteristics?
Yes, it can.
Okay. And in order to do these comparisons of a firearm, what is the procedure that you follow?
The comparisons of the test fires, is
Yes.
that what you're referring to? I would examine the firearm, make sure that it functions correctly, and then I will we have a laboratory stock ammunition that I will go to and pick out cartridge cases or cartridges that are similar to those that have been submitted to me for comparison. I'll then test fire those cartridges in the specific firearm and, excuse me, take them back to the microscope and look at those test fires. And what I'm looking for is repeatability of those accidental or imperfection characteristics on the bearing surface of the cartridge case and the bullet. Once I've looked at those and familiarized myself with them, I will then compare them to the evidence cartridge cases or bullets.
Okay. So basically, you're going to be looking to match the test fires to the evidence submitted
Yes, that's correct.
to see if it was fired from the same gun.
That's correct.
Okay. And what do you do with the test fires?
The test fires are then packaged separately and they are returned to the agency.
Okay. Now, in the case of State of Florida versus Julie Schenecker, were you assigned to do an examination of a firearm, projectiles, or parts of projectiles and casings?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And how did those items come to you?
I picked them up, it's my understanding they came from the Tampa Police Department to our evidence section, and I picked them up from our evidence section.
I'm going to show you what's marked as states 20, 42A, 77B, 79B1, which contains 79D and 79F. Can you take a look at each of these exhibits
Thank you.
and let us know if you recognize those exhibits?
Yes, I recognize all of these exhibits. They are the ones that I examined. They have the unique FDLE case number, the exhibit number, and my initials on all of the packaging.
Okay, first, let's look at 20A. What is 20A?
Are you referring to the
Yes.
revolver? 20A is a Smith & Wesson revolver.
Okay, can you take it out, please?
It's safe.
Okay. And what kind of caliber revolver is that?
This is a .38 Special, and it's also a plus P caliber 5-shot revolver.
Okay, can you just hold it up so the jury can see it? You indicated it's a revolver. Can you just point out the cylinder that would contain the bullets?
The cylinder is this round portion here at the center of the revolver, and the chambers are, you can see the holes in the cylinder, and that's where the cartridges are put.
Okay, and what kind of cartridges would this gun take?
This would take 38 Special plus P cartridges.
Okay, and can you explain how you would get this gun ready to fire?
Yes. If the cylinder was closed, I would then release the cylinder by the latch, open the cylinder up, load the cartridges into the chambers, and close the cylinder back into the frame. The gun is now ready to fire by applying pressure to the trigger.
Okay, does this weapon have any safety functions or safety, what are considered safety, I guess, functions?
It has what's known as a rebound slide. The rebound slide is within the frame of the firearm. It has no exterior safety buttons that you could push.
Okay, and just so we're clear, what is when we say safety buttons or safety functions, what are we referring to?
We're referring to mechanisms that prevent the firearm from discharging automatically or inadvertently.
Okay. You described one safety function on this gun. Can you just explain how that function works?
Yes, the rebound slide, the purpose of the rebound slide is after firing, it then returns the trigger to the forward position and rebounds the hammer so that the hammer isn't resting against the primer of the cartridge.
Okay. And now, when we're talking about firearms, there is a term called trigger pull.
That's correct.
What is trigger pull?
Trigger pull is the amount of force necessary to be applied to the trigger in order to discharge the firearm.
Okay. And there's also, along with trigger pull, something called a hairline trigger. Is that the correct term? Or hair pull trigger?
Hair trigger?
Hair trigger?
Yes.
Can you explain what that is?
Hair trigger, it's not really a term that a firearm analyst uses. It's more of a jargon term, but it's generally used to indicate a very, very light trigger.
Okay. And how much pressure or weight would have to be applied to that trigger to get it to fire?
This particular firearm requires 8 to 8.5 or 8.25 pounds, pressure to discharge the firearm.
Can you explain, and maybe in some kind of example as to how much pressure that is or how much weight that is?
Well, I think we're all familiar with opening up soda cans. A soda can tab takes approximately 6 to 7 pounds of pressure to open. So this would take just slightly more to discharge this firearm.
Okay, so basically you have to pull the trigger for this firearm to discharge.
Yes, absolutely.
Can this firearm discharge accidentally?
No, it did not do that during my testing, and I don't believe it can.
Okay. How quickly can you discharge this firearm, or how many rounds can you discharge?
Well, it holds 5 cartridges, so you can discharge 5 cartridges.
Okay. And basically you can discharge it by pulling the trigger? And then you'd have to pull the trigger again to discharge a second time?
Yes, every time you want to discharge a cartridge, the trigger must be pulled.
Okay. And to reload this gun, how would you do that?
To reload it, again, you would have to push on the cylinder release and open the cylinder and manually, and I can't do it because of the tie strap that's here, well, I guess I can, manually eject the fired cartridge cases from the cylinder and then simply load the cylinder again.
Okay. And so I take it that the cartridge cases or used cartridge cases are just not ejected?
They are not automatically ejected, no.
Okay. And how would you aim this firearm?
It's designed to be fired by the action of one hand, simply point and shoot.
Okay. Does it have some kind of aid in aiming the firearm?
This particular one has a manufacturer's, what's called an Insight brand laser that's put on this particular firearm. You can use it or not use it.
Okay, can you just, if I can have you step down and maybe just show the jury where the button is for the laser?
The laser button is on top of the laser. It's got a various stage button, solid or blinking or off.
And for the record, is that button like a gray, small, round, grayish color?
That's correct.
Okay, on top of the firearm, near the back of the firearm?
Yes, that's correct.
If you can step over this way so the rest of the jury can see it. And if you could, how do you activate that laser?
You simply push down on the button.
Can you do that?
Certainly. Of course, it's not going to work now.
There we go.
It may be that the battery is low on it, but you do just simply push down on it.
There we go. If you can just maybe point it in that direction to demonstrate the laser. Did it come to go turn off?
Yeah, it turned off again. Not cooperating. Yeah, I think the battery is dying on us.
Okay. All right, thank you. Now, in general, do firearms emit smoke when they're fired?
It depends on the ammunition and the firearm itself. A certain amount of smoke is emitted from the muzzle end of the firearm, yes.
Okay. And how did you go about testing this firearm?
This firearm was tested in our range. I put the cartridges inside the cylinders of the chamber and took it into the range, and it's fired into a tank full of water. The bullets are then retrieved from the water for my comparison, and the cartridge cases are removed manually from the cylinder.
Okay, and then you compare those cartridge cases and projectiles to the evidence that's submitted to you?
That's correct.
I'm going to show you what we've had marked as 20E for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes, these are the cartridges that I test fired in this firearm.
Okay. Do they appear to be in the same or substantially same conditions when you last saw it?
They are.
Your Honor, at this time we move into evidence states 20E for identification. It states 20E.
No objection, Judge.
Proceed without objection.
Can you see that, ma'am?
Yes, I can.
What exactly are we looking at here?
You're looking at 3 fired cartridge cases and 3 fired bullets, and these red rubber-like material that you see used to be in the center of those bullets.
Do you have any opinions as to what that red rubbery thing is, or what's the purpose of that?
The manufacturer publishes the purpose as, so that the clothing will not get caught in the hollow point of the bullet when it's fired. And it also supposedly, according to their publication, gives you a more consistent expansion of the hollow point.
You mentioned the term hollow point. What is a hollow point?
A hollow point is a bullet that has the center portion of the nose of it cut out, and the purpose of it is to mushroom or expand on contact.
Okay, so basically, if I understand the purpose, it's basically to make a bigger hole.
That's correct.
Judge, can we approach?
Yes.
What is a hollow point bullet designed to do?
It's designed to mushroom and expand larger than the diameter of the bullet.
Okay. And you compared these test fires to cartridge cases and projectiles submitted to you?
I did.
Okay. Looking first at the cartridge cases that you had.
Yes.
Okay. What opinion did you form about those cartridge cases in comparison to the test fires?
I determined that the cartridge cases Exhibit 42A was fired, they were fired in Exhibit number 20.
Okay. So those cartridge cases were fired in the revolver that you have in front of you?
Yes, they were.
And did you also have submitted to you projectiles?
I did.
Okay. What opinions did you form in reference to the projectiles in comparison to the projectiles you test fired?
There were two projectile jacket fragments and a complete fired projectile, and I determined that they were fired in this revolver. I'm sorry, they were fired from the revolver.
Okay. And these, and they had the same class characteristics
Yes,
as the test fires you used?
that's correct.
And specifically, what is the name of the test fires that you used?
They are Hornady brand, and the name of the cartridge is called Critical Defense.
Okay. And that's the same as the submitted evidence?
It's consistent with it, yes.
Okay. You can have 1 second. Once you had done those comparisons, was that the extent of your involvement in this case?
Yes, it was.
Thank you, ma'am. I can, if I can, just so for clarification, I want to show you 79D and 79F. Did you compare those projectiles to the test fire projectiles?
I compared the projectile fragment, my exhibit number 7C, which is in 79D, and the projectile fragment, my exhibit number 7A, which is in State's Exhibit 79F, with the test fires that I fired in this revolver.
And what conclusion did you reach about those projectiles as being fired, whether they're fired from that firearm or not?
My exhibits 7A and 7C, which are the projectile fragments, were fired from State's Exhibit number 20.
In those two exhibits, 79F, what was it, 79D, are
Yes.
those being represented as coming from the body of Schenecker from the autopsy?
Yes, that's so written on the package.
Okay. No other questions?
Been cross-examined, sir.
Have you have a moment, Judge?
Yes, sir.
Judge, I have no questions for this witness.
May this witness be excused.
Yes, Judge.
Yes, Judge.
Ma'am, you may step down and you're free to go.
Thank you.
With that, members of the jury, I'm going to go ahead and give you your lunch break today. Let's go ahead and set our return time. We're going to, being aware of the logistics here, it takes some time to get places. We're going to make it an hour and 15 minutes, so we'll be back. We know back now means to come through the lobby straight into courtroom 53. You're used to that from this morning. Back at not later than 1:45 p.m., 1:45 p.m., at which time we'll start promptly. As I send you on this lunch break, you know I'm going to remind you we're in the course of trial, not to discuss the case among yourselves, not to discuss it with anyone else, not to allow anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. Again, anyone attempts to say anything to you or in your presence, that's when you tell them you're on the jury trying the case, tell them to immediately stop. They persist, you leave them at once. As soon as possible, you tell one of the bailiffs, who in turn will advise me. Remind you, this case must be tried based upon the evidence presented in this courtroom, in your presence, in the presence of the attorneys, the defendant, and the judge. You're not to conduct any investigation on your own. You're not to read or listen to any reports about this case from any source whatsoever, not to speak at all.